Welcome to the Dawg Podcast. I'm your host, Matt DeBritz. National championship, coaching carousel, and more on today's episode. If this is the first time you listen to me, my podcast is mostly based on Syracuse basketball, but guess what? I'm expanding to talk about more about college basketball in general. I'm a hoops junkie. Been around for a long time in media, spending 21 years at ESPN, and the last few years on my own. The thing I want to talk about today is time, and people need to be given time. And why I say that is everyone talks about winning now, and you need someone who's seasoned to be the coach and this and that. And let's start with UConn. Dan Hurley. Yes, back-to-back titles, dominant. First team since 06, 07, Florida win back-to-back titles. 6 titles in the last 25 years. Third most all-time, tied with North Carolina, only behind UCLA and Kentucky with 11 and 8, respectively. All that's true. But he didn't become a good coach overnight. Him being a good coach is a culmination of several things. Now, his father was a big-time coach in high school in New Jersey. His brother was a big-time player at Duke. He was the guy that won Duke their first national championship in 91 and back-to-back in 92. Dan played in college as well at Seton Hall. You know, he was booed, yelled at, said your brother's better. Same with his dad. Whatever the case, he ends up at Wagner as a coach. Wagner is in Staten Island. Not the greatest Division I job, but that's where he starts. He goes there for 2 years, gets a job at Rhode Island. After a few years at Rhode Island, he makes the NCAA tournament. He makes their program better and look like they're on their way up. He leaves there. UConn's in shambles because of the Kevin Ollie and allegations and all that sort of stuff. He gets them to a winning program again. He called the shot in 2020. They won the last 2 years. Why? Maybe because he'd been in situations that were not great, and he got to UConn and realized this is a great opportunity to show what I can do. But also he was smart. He hired Luke Murray, Bill Murray's son, Groundhog Day. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Kamani Young, who's also been around basketball a long time. Murray, aside the fact that he's Bill's son, is a basketball savant, supposedly, watching film everywhere and all over the world and having sets from teams in different European countries. And there's tons of videos going around of Hurley talking about how he recruits the parents and how important that is to him. And whatever the case is, he's built the culture there. But with other coaches kind of moving around and things going on, I see the trend of happiness and time. And you know, when the news broke, I think it was Sunday night, where people were saying Calipari is going to Arkansas, I thought it was a joke, because who goes from Kentucky to Arkansas? And as I thought about it more, and more reports came out saying that he was looking for jobs, like he was asking people about jobs in other places, it was clear that he wasn't happy. You don't go from Kentucky, a place where you've built into something, to Arkansas, which, you know, is Division I in the SEC, and, you know, has some success lately, but it's not Kentucky. But why would you do that? Because you're unhappy in the situation that you're in, regardless of the school that you play for or you coach for. And I think that you look around, and other guys at Kentucky were looking at Nate Oates. It's like, no, I'm staying at Alabama. You know, he built that program there in the Final Four in the last 5 years. This year, Kentucky hasn't been. So right now, Alabama job is better to him, something that he built, and he's staying there. Scott Drew, he's been to the Final Four. He has a championship in 2021. His family's happy there. They've built a good program there. Why would he go start over just so he can have on his resume or say, I coach Kentucky? Guess it doesn't mean that much to him. And, you know, supposedly Dan Hurley was asked and Jay Wright was asked, and they all said no. And they arrived at Mark Pope, who is kind of a newer coach in Division I. He coached at BYU, but he was a player at Kentucky. And they won in 1996 when he was on the team with those like 9 pros against my Syracuse team. And I think the bottom line is that you can't look at a coach now and say that he's got to win a championship right now, because That's barely ever happened in history. You know, I can think of a few. Steve Fisher as the interim coach at Michigan, winning then. Kevin Ollie winning the championship at UConn when Calhoun retired. But there may have been some other first-year coaches, like Hubert Davis went to the championship with North Carolina as his first season. But it doesn't happen that often. There's not many guys that you plop into a job and they win. And also, look at these blue blood teams. When is the last time they've won? And look at the time between titles. You know, UCLA, they have 11 titles. The last title was in 1995. It's almost 30 years ago. And go down the line. Kentucky, 8 titles, right? The last one was 2012. Before that was 1998. Look how much time it took for them to win another title. You know, North Carolina is a little closer in time with their titles with 2018 and 2009. And obviously they've been in the Final Four in the title game and they're around there. Duke a little shorter between titles, but UConn back to back. It doesn't really happen. So that's why this UConn championship is so rare. And also why people, fans, and ADs and administrators should look at, you know, all they do is look at history and say, well, look how long it takes teams to win championships. And I think, people might think it's a long time, but I think 5 years is a good test. 5 years is a good test of where you are, unless the teams are absolutely horrible in 2 or 3 years, like they didn't improve at all. They're not looking like they're better. They're not getting responses. They're not getting recruits. I don't want to say it's always 5 years, but if you give a guy 5 years and each year they increase and get better, and what are you looking at as far as success? Like conference championships, you know, Final Fours, Elite Eights, Sweet 16s. I think what everyone has to do is taper expectations, because you got to look through history and see teams don't win off the bat. Coaches don't really win off the bat. Teams that are the best teams in college basketball have long times in between titles. So what are we all clamoring for all the time against coaches and players and stuff and programs? You know, it's simple history, and you can look it all up, and I'll post it on my links here. But give Pope time. Give, you know, for my Syracuse people, give Adrian Autry time. You know, he improved the team in one season. They're better than they've been in years. That was under Jim Boeheim. You know, next year he has to win more and make the NCAA tournament. And then after that, he has to win NCAA tournament games. And after that, start competing with the top tier teams in the ACC, so that Syracuse is more relevant on national television and recruits. You know, this year will be a big test. And if you watch what's happening, you know, Jerry McNamara goes to Siena, and Adrian Autry goes outside the program and hires Dan Engelstad. He was coaching at Mount St. Mary's for 6 seasons as the head coach. Kind of a strange thing to do, right? If you're a head coach somewhere and take an assistant coach, but maybe it's for down the line. But according to a couple articles I read, Engelstad is good in the DMV area, and so is Brandon Strawn, the other guy that Autry hired last year. So they're looking to get into the DC area and get more players down here. That's where I am right now, DC area. So it's interesting to see Autry trying to build his staff and his team. One of the other news there is Judah Mintz finally said that he's actually going to go pro. So that wasn't really too much of a surprise to me, but the team is, you know, kind of shaping up in the way Autry needs it to be. So let's see what happens there.